The desert highway stretched endlessly under the burning afternoon sun, heat waves dancing across the cracked asphalt like restless ghosts. Devon Cross pressed his foot harder on the gas pedal of the borrowed pickup truck, eager to reach the small town he had left behind 5 years ago. 5 long years that felt like a lifetime, years spent in places he preferred not to think about anymore. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as familiar landmarks began appearing through the dusty windshield. The old billboard advertising Gardens Motel and Diner emerged from the heat shimmer, its paint faded and peeling at the edges. Devon felt his chest tighten with a mixture of anticipation and dread. This was home, or at least it used to be. The place where he grew up, where his father had built a modest business from nothing, and where his siblings still lived their lives without him. He wondered if they had thought about him at all during his absence, or if they had simply erased him from their memories like his father had tried to erase him from the family legacy. The motel came into view, a single-story structure with 20 rooms painted a tired shade of cream. The diner attached to the front looked exactly as he remembered it, with its red neon sign flickering weakly, even in broad daylight. A few cars sat scattered in the parking lot, their metal surfaces baking in the relentless heat. Devon pulled the truck into an empty spot and killed the engine, sitting for a moment in the sudden silence. Through the diner windows, he could see movement inside, the blurred shapes of people going about their ordinary lives. He climbed out of the truck, feeling the heat immediately slam into him like a physical force. His shirt stuck to his back as he walked toward the diner entrance, his boots crunching on the gravel. The bell above the door chimed as he pushed inside, and blessed cool air washed over him from the rattling air conditioner. The interior was exactly as he remembered, down to the worn red vinyl booths and the black and white checkered floor. A handful of customers sat scattered throughout, and behind the counter stood his sister Nina, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Nina looked up from wiping down the counter, and her eyes went wide with shock. For a moment, neither of them moved, frozen in the awkwardness of unexpected reunion. Then her face broke into a hesitant smile, though Devon could see the questions already forming behind her eyes. She came around the counter quickly, her movements uncertain, as if she was not quite sure whether to embrace him or maintain a careful distance. Before either could speak, a voice called out from the back office. Vincent emerged, carrying a clipboard and looking every bit the businessman their father had wanted him to be. He was thicker around the middle than Devon remembered, his face harder, with lines of stress, or perhaps just living etched around his eyes and mouth. Vincent stopped dead when he saw Devon, his expression shifting through surprise, suspicion, and finally settling into something carefully neutral. The reunion was stilted and awkward. Vincent's greeting was cold, his handshake perfunctory. Nina tried to bridge the gap with nervous chatter, but the weight of the past hung heavy between the 3 siblings. Devon learned quickly that Vincent had married 2 years earlier, after their father's death. The way Vincent spoke about his wife carried a possessive pride that made Devon vaguely uncomfortable, as if she were another piece of property Vincent had acquired, rather than a person he loved. Nina excused herself to attend to a customer, leaving the brothers alone. Vincent wasted no time getting to business, his tone matter-of-fact as he explained that their father had indeed cut Devon from the will entirely. Everything had gone to Vincent, the reliable son who had stayed and worked the business. Devon had expected as much, but hearing it stated so bluntly still stung. He kept his face carefully blank, refusing to give Vincent the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. When Devon mentioned needing work, Vincent's expression shifted slightly, calculation flickering across his features. The motel always needed maintenance, he admitted, and having family help might not be the worst idea. The pay would be modest, barely more than room and board, but it was something. Devon accepted without hesitation. He had nowhere else to go, no other options waiting for him. This place, for all its painful memories, was still the closest thing to home he had. Vincent led him through the diner toward the back, where a door connected to the motel office. As they walked, Vincent kept up a running commentary about the business, about how the new highway had diverted traffic, about the struggles to keep the place profitable. Devon only half listened, his attention caught by the woman who appeared in the doorway ahead of them. She was breathtaking. Long dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, framing a face that could have belonged to a movie star from the golden age of Hollywood. Her figure was curves and elegance wrapped in a simple summer dress that somehow made her even more stunning in its understated beauty. But it was her eyes that truly captured Devon, deep and dark and filled with something he could not quite name. Sadness, perhaps, or maybe just a profound weariness that no amount of physical beauty could hide. Vincent's entire demeanor changed in her presence, his voice taking on a tone of pride mixed with something else, something darker and more possessive. This was Cassandra, his wife, the woman he spoke of like a prized possession. Vincent made the introduction with obvious pleasure, watching Devon's reaction carefully. Devon managed to keep his expression neutral, offering a polite greeting while his heart hammered against his ribs. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in that brief connection, Devon felt something electric pass between them, a recognition or understanding that went beyond words. Cassandra welcomed him with genuine warmth, her voice soft and melodic. She hoped he would stay a while, she said, and Devon found himself agreeing before he even realized he was speaking. Vincent seemed pleased by this, clapping Devon on the shoulder with false heartiness. He assigned Devon a room at the far end of the motel, one of the units that was kept empty for staff or emergencies. As Vincent showed him to the room, Devon could not stop thinking about Cassandra, the way she had looked at him, the sadness behind her beautiful smile, the sense that she was somehow trapped in this place just as surely as he was. He told himself he was being foolish, reading too much into a simple introduction. She was his brother's wife, off limits in every possible way. But the image of her face stayed with him as he unpacked his few belongings in the sparse motel room. That evening, Nina brought him dinner from the diner, a gesture of kindness that touched him more than he expected. They sat together on the small porch outside his room, the desert air cooling slightly as the sun sank toward the horizon. Nina told him about their father's final days, about how the old man had never really recovered from Devon's departure. She said she thought their father had forgiven Devon in his heart, even if he had never found the words or the courage to say so out loud. Later, after Nina left, Devon walked over to the diner for a drink. The evening crowd was thin, just a few regulars nursing beers and watching a baseball game on the television mounted above the bar. Behind the counter stood a young woman Devon had not met yet, probably in her early 20s, with bright eyes and an easy smile. She introduced herself as Ruby, Nina's niece, helping out for the summer. Ruby was pretty in an uncomplicated way, fresh-faced and full of energy that seemed at odds with the tired atmosphere of the motel. She chatted easily as she poured his beer, asking about his travels and his plans. Devon found himself relaxing slightly in her presence, her genuine friendliness, a welcome change from Vincent's cold suspicion. When she mentioned that most guys passing through hit on her within the first 5 minutes, Devon laughed and promised he would try to be more creative in his approach. As the evening wore on, Devon found his thoughts drifting back to Cassandra. He caught glimpses of her through the window connecting the diner to the motel office, moving about in the living quarters Vincent had built for them. The way the light caught her hair, the grace of her movements, everything about her seemed designed to haunt him. He forced himself to focus on Ruby's cheerful conversation, using her as an anchor to keep his thoughts from spiraling into dangerous territory. Vincent appeared eventually, announcing plans for a poker game with some friends. He invited Devon to join, but Devon declined, claiming exhaustion from the long drive. Vincent seemed satisfied with this, reminding Devon that work started early tomorrow before heading off to gather his gambling buddies. As Devon finished his beer and said goodnight to Ruby, he could not shake the feeling that his return home had set something in motion, some chain of events that would lead to places he could not yet imagine. Walking back to his room under the desert stars, Devon tried to tell himself that he would keep his head down, do his work, and stay out of trouble. But deep down, he knew that resolution was already crumbling. This place, these people, his brother's beautiful wife with her sad, knowing eyes. They were all pulling at him, drawing him into complications he should have the sense to avoid. Yet he kept walking forward, toward his room, toward tomorrow, toward whatever fate awaited him in this dusty corner of nowhere that refused to let him go. The first week passed in a blur of manual labor and stolen glances. Devon threw himself into the work Vincent assigned him, repairing broken fixtures, repainting faded walls, and fixing the countless small problems that plagued an aging motel. The physical labor felt good after years of confinement, and he welcomed the exhaustion that came with honest work. But no amount of sweat and effort could distract him from the growing awareness of Cassandra's presence. She was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost that haunted the edges of his consciousness. Sometimes he would catch her watching him from a window as he worked outside, her expression unreadable. Other times they would pass each other in the narrow hallways of the motel, their bodies nearly touching in the confined space, the air between them crackling with unspoken tension. They barely spoke beyond polite greetings, but the silence between them felt more intimate than any conversation could have been. Vincent, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the undercurrent swirling around him. He spent his days managing the business with an iron grip, counting every dollar and scrutinizing every expense. His nights were devoted to poker games with his friends, marathon sessions that stretched until dawn and left him irritable and exhausted. Devon noticed how Vincent treated Cassandra more like a possession than a partner, barking orders at her and expecting immediate obedience. The way his brother spoke to his wife made Devon's jaw clench with barely suppressed anger. Ruby became a regular fixture in Devon's evenings. She would seek him out after her shifts, bringing him cold beers and easy conversation. She was sweet and uncomplicated, exactly the kind of distraction Devon needed. They flirted harmlessly, dancing around the edges of something more without ever quite crossing the line. Ruby talked about her dreams of leaving this small town, of seeing the world beyond the desert highways. Devon listened and encouraged her, all while feeling like a fraud because his own thoughts were consumed by someone else entirely. It was on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks after his arrival, that everything shifted. Vincent had announced he was driving into the city for a business meeting with the bank director, some investment opportunity that would keep him away overnight. Devon watched his brother leave, feeling the atmosphere in the motel immediately lighten once Vincent's truck disappeared down the highway. Nina had taken the evening off, leaving the diner under Ruby's capable management. Devon was working on the air conditioning unit outside room 12 when he sensed someone approaching. He turned to find Cassandra standing a few feet away, holding 2 cold bottles of water. She wore a simple white sundress that caught the fading sunlight, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a physical thing. She offered him one of the bottles, her fingers brushing against his as he took it. The contact sent electricity shooting up his arm, and from the way her breath caught, he knew she felt it too. They stood there in the golden hour light, drinking water, and not quite looking at each other, both acutely aware that they were alone in a way they had never been before. Cassandra spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. She thanked him for the work he was doing, for helping Vincent even though he had every reason to resent his brother. Devon shrugged, unsure how to respond. Then she asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. Where had he really been for 5 years? Vincent had told her Europe, but she could see the truth in Devon's eyes, in the way he carried himself. She knew he had been somewhere darker, somewhere that had marked him. Devon found himself telling her the truth, not all of it, but enough. He had made mistakes, gotten involved with the wrong people, and paid the price. 5 years in a place where every day felt like an eternity, where he learned that freedom was something most people took for granted until it was taken away. Cassandra listened without judgment, her dark eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she simply nodded, as if she understood more than he had actually said. Then it was her turn to share. She told him about her life before Vincent, about growing up poor in a small town even more desolate than this one. She spoke of hunger and desperation, of a childhood spent watching her mother work herself into an early grave for pennies. When Vincent had come along, offering security and stability, she had grabbed onto him like a life raft. She had thought she could learn to love him, or at least that the comfort of financial security would be enough. She had been wrong on both counts. Vincent was possessive and controlling, she explained, her voice trembling slightly. He saw her as property, something he owned and controlled. Behind closed doors, when his temper flared, he could be cruel. Not always physically violent, though that had happened too, but emotionally vicious in ways that left deeper scars. She felt trapped, suffocated by the gilded cage he had built around her. She had thought about leaving countless times, but Vincent had made it clear that he would never let her go. He would hunt her down, he had promised, and make her regret ever trying to escape him. Devon felt rage building in his chest as she spoke. His brother, the man who had everything handed to him, who had stolen Devon's inheritance and built his little empire on their father's broken dreams, was also a monster to the woman who should have been cherished. Without thinking, Devon reached out and took Cassandra's hand. She did not pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling around her. The kiss happened without conscious decision. One moment they were standing there, hands clasped, and the next their lips met in a collision of desperation and desire. Cassandra tasted like summer and sadness, and Devon lost himself in the sensation of finally touching her, finally giving in to the attraction that had been building since the moment they met. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the knowledge of what they had just done hung heavy in the air between them. "They should stop," Cassandra whispered, even as she pulled him closer. This was wrong, dangerous, insane. Vincent would kill them both if he found out. Devon agreed with every word, even as his hands found her waist, pulling her against him. They were playing with fire, and they both knew it. But the need was too strong, the connection too powerful to resist. They stumbled toward Devon's room, barely making it inside before their bodies came together with the urgency of people who had been starving and finally found sustenance. Afterward, lying tangled in the sheets as the desert night settled around them, they both knew there was no going back. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Cassandra traced patterns on Devon's chest with her fingertips, her expression troubled. She told him this could not continue, that they needed to end it before someone got hurt. Devon agreed, even as he pulled her closer, already knowing that ending it was impossible. They were caught now, trapped in a web of their own making. The affair became the center of Devon's existence. They stole moments whenever they could, quick encounters filled with passionate desperation. When Vincent was occupied with his endless poker games, Cassandra would slip into Devon's room, and they would lose themselves in each other. It was reckless and foolish, but neither of them seemed capable of stopping. The danger only added to the intensity, every touch heightened by the knowledge that discovery meant destruction. Ruby began to sense something was off. Devon could see the questions forming in her eyes when he made excuses to avoid spending time with her. She was smart enough to know he was hiding something, but too kind to push. One evening, she cornered him at the bar, her usual brightness dimmed by concern. She asked him directly if he was in some kind of trouble, if there was something she could help with. Devon lied smoothly, blaming his distraction on family issues and the stress of rebuilding his relationship with Vincent. Ruby seemed to accept this explanation, though doubt lingered in her expression. Vincent's behavior grew more erratic as the weeks passed. His poker losses mounted, and his temper shortened accordingly. Devon witnessed several incidents that made his blood boil. Once, he heard Vincent shouting at Cassandra through the thin walls of the office, his voice vicious and cutting. Another time, he saw a bruise on Cassandra's wrist, finger-shaped marks that she tried to hide with long sleeves despite the desert heat. When Devon confronted her about it, she begged him not to make things worse by intervening. Vincent's anger would only intensify if he thought someone was questioning his authority. The tension reached a breaking point one night when Devon was invited to join Vincent's poker game. He had been avoiding these gatherings, but Vincent had insisted with a firmness that suggested refusal was not an option. The game was held in the diner after hours, with Vincent's usual crew. Frank, his oldest friend, was there, along with a few other local men who seemed content to lose their money to Vincent's superior skill. Devon played carefully, neither winning too much, nor losing too obviously. He watched his brother across the table, seeing the cruel pleasure Vincent took in dominating the game. When Cassandra brought fresh drinks, Vincent grabbed her roughly, pulling her onto his lap in a display of ownership that made Devon's hands curl into fists beneath the table. Cassandra endured it with practiced grace, her face a mask of pleasant indifference, but Devon saw the flash of humiliation in her eyes. The real trouble started when Frank made a crude joke about beautiful women and unfaithful husbands. Vincent's expression darkened immediately, his possessive nature flaring. He launched into a speech about loyalty and betrayal, his words slurred slightly from the whiskey he had been drinking. If he ever discovered that Cassandra had been unfaithful, he declared, he would kill her with his bare hands. No court, no mercy, just pure retribution. The other men laughed nervously, unsure if Vincent was joking or serious. Devon knew he was deadly serious. After the game broke up, Devon found himself alone with Frank for a moment. The older man studied him with shrewd eyes, then made a cryptic comment about being careful, about how some situations had no good outcomes. The warning was clear, though Frank never said anything directly. Somehow, he had sensed what was happening, or at least suspected. Devon felt ice water in his veins as he realized how close to the edge they were dancing. That night, when Cassandra came to his room, Devon tried to end things. He told her about Vincent's threats, about Frank's warning, about the impossibility of their situation. Cassandra listened quietly, tears streaming down her face. Then she told him about her visit to Mr. Hartwell, Vincent's lawyer. She had gone looking for information about the will, hoping to find leverage she could use to secure her own freedom. What she found instead was evidence of fraud. Vincent had worked with Hartwell to manufacture documents cutting Devon out of the inheritance entirely. Their father's actual will had left everything to be split between the brothers, but Vincent had stolen it all. They stood together in the dimness of the room, holding each other like drowning people clinging to wreckage. Cassandra's next words came out in a desperate rush. They needed to leave, she insisted. Run away together, disappear before Vincent's web closed around them completely. They could go somewhere far away, start over with new names, build a life free from his shadow. Devon wanted to agree, wanted to promise her escape and freedom, but reality intruded. They had no money, no resources, nowhere to run that Vincent could not eventually find them. Cassandra pulled back, her eyes wild with desperation. Then there was only one solution, she whispered. They had to remove Vincent from the equation permanently. The word hung unspoken between them, too terrible to voice but impossible to ignore. Murder. She was talking about killing his brother, about ending a life to secure their own happiness. Devon felt revulsion and temptation war within him. Part of him recoiled from the idea with every fiber of his being, but another part, a darker part shaped by 5 years of survival in brutal circumstances, calculated the possibilities. He told her no, his voice firm despite the trembling in his hands. Murder was not an answer, could never be an answer. It would solve nothing and destroy whatever remained of their souls. They would find another way, he promised, though he had no idea what that way might be. Cassandra looked at him with eyes full of disappointment and something like contempt. She called him a coward, just like Vincent had always said. Too weak to take what he wanted, too scared to fight for their chance at happiness. Her words cut deep because they touched on fears Devon had carried since childhood. Vincent had always been the strong one, the capable one, while Devon was the dreamer who could never quite measure up. He had spent 5 years proving he could survive, could endure, but maybe surviving was not the same as being strong. Maybe real strength meant being willing to do terrible things when necessary. The thought horrified him even as it tempted him. Cassandra left his room in a storm of emotion, and Devon spent the night staring at the ceiling, her proposal echoing in his mind. Could he really kill his own brother? Vincent was cruel and controlling, a thief who had stolen Devon's inheritance, and a bully who terrorized his wife. The world would arguably be better without him, but the act itself, the deliberate taking of a life, felt like stepping across a threshold from which there could be no return. Devon had done many things he regretted, but he had never killed anyone. The thought of crossing that line made him feel sick. The next morning brought a new complication. Ruby cornered him behind the diner, her pretty face set with determination. She knew something was going on, she told him. She was not stupid, and she had eyes. The way he looked at Cassandra, the tension that filled every room when they were together, the secret meetings she had noticed despite their attempts at discretion. Ruby's voice cracked as she accused him of using her, of pretending to care while his heart belonged to someone else. Devon wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. Ruby deserved better than lies, even if the truth would hurt her. He admitted that his feelings were complicated, that he had made mistakes and dragged her into a situation she should never have been part of. Ruby's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back with visible effort. She told him she had fallen for him, had imagined a future where they could escape this dead-end town together. Now she felt like a fool for believing in fairy tales. Before Devon could respond, Vincent's voice cut through the moment like a knife. His brother stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How touching," Vincent said with poisonous sweetness. His little brother, the romantic, breaking hearts wherever he went. He suggested Ruby get back to work before he decided her services were no longer needed. Ruby fled, shooting Devon one last wounded look before disappearing into the diner. Vincent approached slowly and Devon tensed, ready for confrontation. But his brother's tone was almost friendly when he spoke. He needed Devon to handle things at the motel for a few days, Vincent explained. He had business in the city, important meetings that could not be postponed. Devon would be in charge, responsible for everything. It was a test of trust, Vincent said, though his eyes held no trust at all. Devon agreed because he had no choice, and Vincent left with a smile that never reached his eyes. With Vincent gone, the atmosphere at the motel shifted. Cassandra moved through the space like she could finally breathe, her shoulders losing some of their perpetual tension. But Devon noticed she avoided being alone with him, maintaining careful distance as if afraid of what might happen if they touched. The rejection stung more than he wanted to admit, but he understood it. They were poison to each other, a destructive force that would consume them both if they did not find a way to break free. The two strangers, who Devon learned were named Kurt and Rowdy, hung around the motel like vultures waiting for something to die. They drank at the bar, played pool in the diner's game room, and watched everything with predatory interest. Kurt, the scarred one, seemed to be the leader, while Rowdy followed his commands with animal obedience. Devon caught them watching Cassandra with looks that made his blood boil, their gazes stripping her naked with insulting casualness. On the second night of Vincent's absence, Devon was working late on the motel's ancient plumbing when he heard raised voices from the diner. He rushed over to find Kurt and Rowdy confronting Cassandra, blocking her path as she tried to close up for the night. They were not doing anything overtly threatening, just standing too close, speaking in low tones that Devon could not quite hear. But Cassandra's body language screamed fear, her eyes wide and her hands trembling. Devon inserted himself between them and Cassandra, his voice cold as he told them the diner was closing. Kurt smiled his predator's smile and suggested they all have a friendly drink together, just being sociable. Devon refused, his tone leaving no room for argument. For a moment, tension crackled in the air, violence hovering on the edge of eruption. Then Rowdy laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender, and they backed off. But the threat remained, hanging in the air like smoke. After they left, Cassandra collapsed against Devon, her composure finally cracking. She told him about the things Kurt had said to her, crude suggestions and veiled threats. She was terrified of them, convinced they were dangerous in ways that went beyond ordinary criminality. Devon held her, promising protection he was not sure he could deliver. When she looked up at him, her eyes held a desperate question. Was he ready now? Ready to do what needed to be done? Devon found himself wavering, the moral certainty that had seemed so solid beginning to erode. Vincent had brought these dangerous men here. Vincent had created this situation with his schemes and his cruelty. Maybe Cassandra was right. Maybe the only way to be truly free was to remove Vincent permanently. The thought still horrified him, but horror was becoming familiar, losing its power to stop him. They ended up in Devon's room again, their lovemaking desperate and almost violent, fueled by fear and adrenaline. Cassandra whispered her plan between kisses, painting a picture of how it could be done, how they could make it look like an accident or perhaps blame those dangerous strangers Vincent had invited into their lives. Devon listened without committing, caught between desire and conscience, between the man he had been and the man circumstances were forcing him to become. The next morning brought Vincent's return. He swept in like a storm, his mood foul and his temper hair-trigger. The business in the city had gone poorly, Devon gathered from overheard fragments of conversation. Money was tighter than ever, and Vincent's desperation was becoming palpable. He gathered his usual poker crew that night, including Kurt and Rowdy, who seemed to be joining the regular game. Devon watched from the bar as the game progressed, Vincent drinking heavily and losing badly. The man's control was slipping, his civilized veneer cracking to reveal the violence underneath. When Cassandra brought fresh drinks, Vincent grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks, pulling her close to make some point to the other men about knowing how to keep a woman in line. Devon's hands clenched around his beer bottle. rage flooding through him so intensely he saw red at the edges of his vision. Frank caught Devon's eye across the room, and the older man's expression held both warning and something like sympathy. He knew, Devon realized. Frank had figured out what was happening between Devon and Cassandra, and he was trying to warn them that the situation was spiraling out of control. But warnings meant nothing now. They were all caught in a web of lies and desire and violence, spinning faster toward an inevitable conclusion that none of them could prevent. As the night wore on and the game continued, Devon made his decision. He could not kill Vincent in cold blood, but he also could not continue living in this hell. Tomorrow, he would take Cassandra and run. They would disappear into the vast American landscape, find some place where Vincent could never reach them. It was a desperate plan with little chance of success, but it was better than murder. Better than becoming the monster circumstances were trying to create. The morning sun was barely a pink promise on the horizon when Devon began preparing for their escape. He moved quietly through his room, packing the few possessions he owned into a worn duffel bag. His hands shook slightly as he counted the meager savings he had accumulated over the past weeks, knowing it was nowhere near enough, but hoping it would carry them far enough to disappear. Every sound from outside made him freeze, certain that Vincent had somehow discovered their plan and was coming to end everything before it could begin. Cassandra had agreed to meet him at dawn by the old storage shed behind the motel, away from windows and watching eyes. They would take her car and drive east, toward states where nobody knew their names or faces. It was a fantasy, Devon knew, built on desperation and naive hope, but it was the only alternative to the darkness Cassandra kept pulling him toward. He refused to become a murderer, refused to let this situation destroy what remained of his soul. He was checking his watch for the 10th time when he heard the commotion outside, voices raised in anger, the sound of breaking glass, a scream that made his blood freeze. Devon dropped his bag and ran toward the noise, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sounds were coming from the main house, from the living quarters Vincent shared with Cassandra. Devon's mind conjured terrible images as he sprinted across the parking lot, his boots pounding against the gravel. The front door stood open, hanging crooked on its hinges, as if someone had kicked it in. Devon burst through to find chaos. The living room was destroyed, furniture overturned and belongings scattered everywhere. Vincent stood in the center of the wreckage, his face purple with rage, holding a crumpled piece of paper in his shaking fist. When he saw Devon, something murderous flashed in his eyes. Before Devon could speak, Vincent lunged at him, the paper thrust into his face. It was a letter, Devon realized, written in Cassandra's delicate handwriting. Words jumped out at him in fragments, phrases about love and escape, about being trapped and desperate for freedom. His stomach dropped as understanding crashed over him. Cassandra had written it all down, every feeling and secret thought, and somehow Vincent had found it. Vincent's fist connected with Devon's jaw before he could dodge, the impact sending him stumbling backward. His brother was screaming, words tumbling out in an incoherent stream of rage and betrayal. Whore, traitor, thief. The insults kept coming as Vincent advanced. Devon tried to defend himself, to explain or at least deflect the violence, but Vincent was beyond reason. Years of resentment and jealousy poured out in every blow, the golden child finally unleashing the hatred he had always carried for his wayward brother. They crashed through the remains of the living room, grappling and punching with brutal desperation. Devon was younger and had learned to fight in harder places, but Vincent fought with the fury of a man whose entire world had just shattered. Blood flowed from both their faces as they traded blows, knocking over what little furniture remained standing. Through the haze of pain and adrenaline, Devon kept looking for Cassandra, terrified of what Vincent might have already done to her. A gunshot split the air, freezing both men mid-struggle. They turned to find Nina standing in the doorway, holding Vincent's hunting rifle with trembling hands. Her face was pale with shock and fear, tears streaming down her cheeks. She begged them to stop, her voice breaking with emotion. This was madness, she cried. They were family. They were brothers. Whatever had happened could be worked through, but not like this. Never like this. The interruption gave Devon a chance to wrench himself free from Vincent's grip. He staggered backward, wiping blood from his split lip. Where was Cassandra? The question came out as a ragged gasp. Vincent's smile was terrible to see. cruel and triumphant. He told Devon that his precious lover was gone, had run away like the coward she was, but she would not get far. Vincent had friends, connections, people who would find her and bring her back to face consequences. Nobody made a fool of Vincent Cross and escaped unpunished. Devon felt panic clawing at his chest. He had to find Cassandra, had to make sure she was safe. He pushed past Nina, ignoring her protests, and ran for the parking lot. Cassandra's car was gone, he realized with a mixture of relief and terror. She had fled. But where? And how long before Vincent made good on his threats? He fumbled for his phone, trying her number with shaking fingers, but it went straight to voicemail. She had either turned it off or thrown it away, eliminating the way Vincent could track her. The sound of engines drew his attention back to the present danger. Kurt and Rowdy's car pulled into the lot, the two men climbing out with expressions that suggested they knew exactly why they had been summoned. Vincent emerged from the house, still radiating fury, and pulled them aside for a hushed conversation. Devon caught fragments, enough to understand that Vincent was sending them after Cassandra, offering money to bring her back. The way Kurt smiled made Devon's skin crawl with dread. Before Devon could intervene, before he could figure out how to stop what was happening, Ruby appeared at his elbow. Her face was serious, all traces of her usual brightness gone. She grabbed his arm and pulled him away from the main group, speaking quickly and quietly. She had seen Cassandra leave an hour ago, Ruby told him, heading toward the old highway that led to the state line. But Ruby had also overheard Kurt and Rowdy talking last night, bragging about jobs they had done, people they had hurt. They were not just hired muscle, they were genuine criminals, dangerous men who enjoyed violence. Devon felt the situation spiraling completely out of control. He needed to go after Cassandra, to reach her before those monsters did, but he had no car and no idea which direction she had actually gone. Ruby seemed to read his mind. She pressed her car keys into his hand, her expression fierce despite the fear in her eyes. She told him to go, to find Cassandra and get far away. Ruby would handle things here, would try to delay Vincent and his hired thugs as long as possible. The gesture touched Devon more than he could express. Ruby was risking everything to help him despite the pain he had caused her. He tried to thank her, to apologize for all the lies and hurt, but she cut him off with a shake of her head. She told him she understood now, understood what it felt like to love someone so desperately that nothing else mattered. She hoped he found his happiness, even if that happiness did not include her. Devon ran for Ruby's car, his mind racing through possibilities and plans. He had maybe an hour's head start before Kurt and Rowdy came after them, maybe less if Vincent pushed them to move immediately. The old highway Ruby mentioned stretched for hundreds of miles through empty desert, with few towns and fewer places to hide. Finding Cassandra would be like searching for a ghost, but he had to try. The alternative, leaving her to face Vincent's wrath alone, was unthinkable. He was 10 miles down the highway when his phone rang. Cassandra's voice came through, barely audible over static and the sound of wind. She was at a rest stop, she told him, waiting and terrified. She had tried to leave without him, had written the letter as a goodbye, thinking it would be easier for them both if she just disappeared. But she could not do it, could not leave without seeing him one more time. Devon's heart surged with relief and renewed fear. He told her to stay hidden, that he was coming for her, that they would figure out the rest together. The rest stop appeared like a mirage in the desert heat, a cluster of buildings shimmering in the distance. Devon spotted Cassandra's car immediately, parked in the shadows away from the main facilities. He pulled in beside it, and she emerged like a frightened animal, her face streaked with tears and terror. They held each other in the burning sunlight, two desperate people clinging to the wreckage of their choices. They had maybe 20 minutes before pursuit caught up with them, Devon estimated. They needed a plan, a destination, something beyond just running blindly. Cassandra had an aunt in New Mexico, she remembered suddenly, a woman she had not seen in years, but who had always been kind. It was not much, but it was something, a direction to aim for. They transferred Cassandra's belongings to Ruby's car, leaving her vehicle behind as a false trail, and merged back onto the highway. For 30 glorious minutes, Devon allowed himself to believe they might actually escape. The road stretched empty before them, and each mile put more distance between them and Vincent's rage. Cassandra held his hand across the center console, her grip desperate but hopeful. They talked about the future they might build, careful plans whispered like prayers, a small apartment somewhere anonymous, simple jobs that paid enough to survive, quiet lives free from violence and fear. It was a modest dream, but after everything they had endured, modest felt like paradise. The black sedan appeared in his rearview mirror like destiny catching up. Devon's stomach dropped as he recognized Kurt and Rowdy's car, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Somehow they had tracked them, had known which direction to search. Maybe Vincent had contacts along the highway, people who owed him favors, or maybe it was just cruel luck, fate ensuring that escape remained impossible. Devon pressed the accelerator to the floor, but Ruby's old car was no match for the powerful engine behind them. Cassandra looked back, her face draining of color as she recognized their pursuers. She told Devon to let her out, to save himself while he still could. Vincent wanted her, not him. If she surrendered, maybe Devon could still get away. The suggestion was so absurd that Devon almost laughed despite the terror coursing through him. He had not come this far, risked this much, to abandon her now. The sedan pulled alongside them, and Devon saw Rowdy grinning through the passenger window, his face alight with vicious pleasure. Kurt swerved suddenly, forcing Devon toward the shoulder. Metal screamed as the cars collided, and Devon fought to maintain control on the narrow road. Another impact sent them skidding, tires shrieking against asphalt. Cassandra screamed as they spun, the world rotating in sickening circles. The crash seemed to happen in slow motion. Devon felt the car leave the road, felt the stomach-dropping sensation of momentary flight, then the brutal impact as they hit the sandy embankment and rolled. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, and pain exploded through his body. Then darkness took him, merciful and complete. He woke to agony and confusion. Time had passed, though he had no idea how much. His body was a symphony of pain, and something warm and wet ran down his face. Blood, he realized dimly. He was lying in sand beside the overturned car, the desert sun beating down mercilessly. Memory returned in fragments. The chase, the crash, Cassandra. Where was Cassandra? Devon forced himself to move despite the screaming protests of his battered body. He could see figures in the distance, Kurt and Rowdy dragging someone toward their car. Cassandra. She was fighting them with everything she had, but they were too strong, too practiced at inflicting violence. Devon tried to stand, to go to her, but his legs would not support his weight. He collapsed back into the sand, helpless and broken. The sound of sirens penetrated his consciousness. Police were coming, drawn by reports of the crash, or perhaps by Ruby calling in favors. Kurt and Rowdy heard them too. They released Cassandra with obvious reluctance, spitting curses and threats. They would be back, Kurt promised, his scarred face twisted with rage. This was not over. Then they were gone, their sedan roaring back toward the highway in a cloud of dust. The next hours passed in a blur of paramedics and police questions. Devon and Cassandra were both transported to the hospital, their injuries assessed and treated. Nothing life-threatening, the doctors said, though Devon had a concussion and several cracked ribs. Cassandra had escaped with mostly bruises and shock, protected somewhat by the airbag deployment. They were lucky, everyone kept saying. Lucky to be alive. Vincent arrived at the hospital like a storm, all false concern and possessive fury. He played the worried husband perfectly for the police, his performance worthy of awards. Those men who caused the accident were criminals, he explained, strangers who had stayed at his motel and apparently developed an obsession with his beautiful wife. He had no idea why they might have pursued Cassandra, unless they intended robbery or worse. The police accepted his story, noting that Kurt and Rowdy were wanted for multiple crimes across several states. In a private moment, with only the three of them present in Cassandra's hospital room, Vincent dropped his mask. His smile was poisonous as he told them exactly how things would proceed. Cassandra would come home with him, would resume her role as his dutiful wife, and would never again speak to Devon. As for Devon, he would leave immediately, disappear back into whatever hole he had crawled out of, and never return. If either of them disobeyed, Vincent would make sure certain evidence reached the police, evidence suggesting they had hired Kurt and Rowdy to kill him for the inheritance and insurance money. The threat was clear and credible. Vincent had somehow manufactured proof of a conspiracy that never existed, insurance policies, and forged documents that painted Devon and Cassandra as would-be murderers. The lawyer, Mr. Hartwell, would testify to their schemes if necessary. It was checkmate, complete and absolute. Vincent had won, and they had lost everything. Devon wanted to fight, to rage against the injustice, but what weapons did he have? He was an ex-convict with no money, no resources, no credibility. Cassandra was trapped in a marriage to a man who saw her as property and had the power to make good on every threat. The system Vincent had built was too strong, too complete. They could not beat him, could only survive him. The day Devon left town, Ruby came to say goodbye. Her eyes were sad but understanding as she hugged him gently, careful of his injuries. She told him that Cassandra was back at the motel, moving through her days like a ghost, all the light gone from her eyes. Vincent watched her constantly, his jealous possession intensified by his victory. It was a prison more secure than any bars could create. Ruby pressed an envelope into Devon's hand, refusing to let him open it until she was gone. Inside, he found $500 in carefully saved bills and a note in her handwriting. The money was to help him start over, wherever he ended up. The note simply said that some loves were worth the cost no matter how high. She hoped he carried good memories alongside the pain, and that someday he might find peace. As Devon's bus pulled away from the small desert town, he looked back one final time at the motel that had been both heaven and hell. Somewhere in that cluster of buildings, Cassandra was living her imprisoned life, beautiful and trapped and forever out of reach. The taste of what they had shared, brief and desperate and doomed, would haunt him for the rest of his days. Some cages, he realized, were built not with bars but with circumstances and power, and the people trapped inside them could only watch as the world moved on without them. The desert highway stretched endlessly before him, carrying him toward an uncertain future. Behind him lay the wreckage of desires and dreams, the price paid for daring to reach for happiness in a world controlled by cruel men. Devon closed his eyes against the tears threatening to fall, knowing that forgetting was impossible and that some wounds never truly healed. The story of his brother's deadly obsession, of love found and lost in the shadows of violence and betrayal, would be the burden he carried into whatever came next.